Welcome, Patty, to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I am so glad to have you here. I've been itching to have this conversation with you. I've been
Yeah, I'm so
thinking-
excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time. It's very appreciated. And I really just wanted to kick this off with you telling us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, all the good stuff, and any just fun facts about you outside of your loss.
Okay, so I am Patti LaFleur, and I am from the Seattle, Washington area, born and raised. I live like 10 minutes from the house I grew up in. I was adopted by my parents, and that just really shaped a lot of my journey and a lot of the ways that I think about just life in general and opportunity and how things kind of fall into place, especially when I think about my caregiving journey. It became such an opportunity to give back to my parents and specifically my mom for everything that she gave me. I taught kindergarten for 10 years. I am really passionate in the education space and supporting youth and helping them now kind of in this like caregiving role to help youth find their voice. And so I'm kind of all over the board in the ages of people that I spend time with and I enjoy working with and I enjoy supporting, but also I am just me. I'm a big baseball fan. I love giraffes. I just am someone that
I love it.
just loves hard and love just this idea around love and opportunity and joy is something that is really important when I think about who I am as a person.
I love that. And let me just tell you, and obviously all of your links and everything will be in the show notes if anybody here listening is not following you already, but everything you just said exudes from every single thing you post and your sweet mom, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I got it all from my mom, right? Like,
Yeah. I love that we got it from our mama kind of.
yeah, you know, like
People,
she
there's
definitely,
something to that.
yeah, I say she was sunshine in human form. And
Mhm.
if I'm even like half of the sunshine she is, then she gave it to me.
Yeah. If we're just like the ray of the sunshine that our moms
Exactly.
were. It's so
Right, for
true.
sure. What
I
a
love
like
that.
opportunity and blessing that we get to have these little rays of their sunshine.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, so speaking of your mom and really just your life in general, any other losses you've experienced, tell us a little bit about your journey of loss and grief. What has that been like for you and continues to be like for you? Like anything you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say that loss with my mom specifically started at time of diagnosis. So
Mhm.
my mom got diagnosed with younger onset mixed dementia when she was in her early 60s. And that to me is really when loss and grief became a part of my life and my journey. So at first, when the diagnosis happened, my coping mechanism was this idea around denial and pushing it away and being like, if I'm not there, then I can't see that I'm losing my mom. But happened pretty quickly by the time it was my wedding. And we had all of these wedding events that my mom was attending, but not attending as my mom, is
Mhm.
really when the grief started. And I would say, that's the piece around the anticipatory grief, right? She
Yeah.
was continuously losing pieces of herself, and I was losing pieces of my mom. But for me, it was most challenging to really watch her lose those pieces of herself. We always talked about my wedding and how that would be such a special moment for us to share in. And it really wasn't, right? She was happy, and I have beautiful pictures from that day. And I'm so thankful she was able to be there, but she wasn't there as my mom.
She was like
She,
there, quote unquote. Like,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
she wasn't able to, host my bridal shower like we always planned. She wasn't, she didn't know who I was marrying or any of these things that we planned that we thought were going to happen. And so I continually was losing pieces of her until she passed last year. So it was just like this continual loss that built up to this really final Big loss. I would say that for me, when I reflect on like the anticipatory grief versus just this grief,
Yeah.
like this grief is significantly more challenging because even though I was losing pieces of her and I was constantly in this state of grief, she
Mhm.
was still here and she was still laughing and we were still connected, not as mother and daughter, but as two friends, we were just still connected in our love. Also, about 6 months before my mom passed, my dad passed as well. And so I lost my dad in 2020, but I wasn't really able to even fully grieve losing him because my mom didn't have any idea that she was married or what her connection was to him.
Right.
So she was more sad that I had lost my dad because she didn't even think she was married. So she wasn't able to grieve my dad. So when my mom passed, I was grieving my mom, but it was actually the time that I was able to really start even grieving my dad. So it was like this double whammy of losing both my parents when she passed.
Wow. Okay. I don't think I knew that about your story actually, that okay, which is crazy because my parents also passed 6 months apart, not like
Yeah,
clearly not in the same way, but like I completely can empathize with that feeling of like you can't even like process one, like the first one, and then the second one happens and you're like, "I'm sorry, who am I? Where am I? Like what?"
totally. Well, and even
Oh,
from a like paperwork standpoint, like
yeah.
we hadn't completed like closing out my dad's accounts and moving them into my mom's name. And so then when my mom passed, it was even more complicated in a logistical standpoint because they were like, well, Lewis's beneficiary was Linda. And I'm like, oh, well, Linda's passed. And they're like, but it just became, I'm sure you
Yeah, you're
understand.
like, "Please don't ask questions. This is just how."
Yeah,
Like
the logistical financial nightmare. I mean, I
Yes.
remember even when my mom got cremated, because she got cremated at the same place as my dad, when they called to say her body's arrived, we're going to start the process. She was like, I read your name and I was like, I really hope it's not the same Patti LaFleur. I hope it's a different Patty. Like, I remember that she knew how fresh the grief and that process was, that she was even like, I really hope it's not her. And I'm like, oh no, it's me. Hi.
Hey,
Yeah.
hey, what's
We're,
up?
you
We're
remember
back.
me. Yeah, I'm back. So it
Oh my
just
god.
became this logistical, financial, and emotional tornado. I mean, I don't know what the right
Nightmare,
word is
hell,
for.
whatever you want.
Earthquake? I don't know.
Oh my god. Wow, I relate to so much of that in so many ways, and it's crazy because the same thing with the funeral home, same thing with my mom and dad, but, like, yeah, actually well, yeah, backwards as far as, like, losing mom
Yeah.
first or whatever, but, yeah, the guy literally his name was Clinton, bless him, he's an angel, but he was just like, You weren't here all that long ago, were you?" I'm like, "Nope, sure was not." But
Yeah.
it was like, I literally it's surreal. You're just
It
like,
is.
"How
It
is
is. Well, and for me, it was like I had taken my mom to pick up my dad's ashes. And so I had like navigated that whole day. And then when my mom passed, I was like to my husband, I was like, you have to take me. Like, I'm not doing this again.
I
And I'm
simply
not
cannot."
doing it by myself. And he was like, wow, this is like really crazy way to go. I'm like, I just did it 5 months ago. I'm telling you, this is
Been
kind
there,
of a
done that.
weird spot. Yeah. Like, what are you talking about? So it was so interesting how different those two experiences were as far as like picking up the ashes and the emotions I was able to have. I wasn't
Mhm.
able to have those when I was caring for my mom. If I had just been sad and really deep in my grief, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to show up for my mom. My mom didn't have the ability to grieve my dad. So I had to just kind of push it to the side and be like, it's okay. We're going to go pick up these ashes and then we're going to go get lunch, like we're going
God,
to have
I
a fun
can
day.
I'm laughing, but, like, I can't it's almost like
Yeah.
almost discomfort because okay, so, oh, now I have to ask you, it's kind of like a two-sided question. So, first I wanna know, like, how much of well, okay, yeah, we swear on this podcast, how much of a mind fuck that was,
Yeah.
but also, after that, I definitely because, again, I wanna educate a little bit on dementia and stuff here, like, what were some of the first signs that you saw in your mom of dementia? So we can
Yeah.
cross the dad bridge first and then maybe answer that.
Yeah. So with my grieving my dad, trying to grieve my dad while my mom was later in her dementia diagnosis. So by the time my dad passed, my mom was in the mid to late stages of her dementia diagnosis. So her ability to understand the connections or to really understand loss or life or any of the emotions around that was so disconnected that I really just had to keep going for her because I also didn't know at that time how much more time I had with my mom. And I mean, I thought it was going to be longer than 6 months, but
Yeah.
I really, for me, it was so important that I lived in the moment with my mom and we tried to find joy and connection every day so that if I was in this like sad piece, she just reflected or mirrored the same emotions
Mm.
I had. So then it actually would have made caring for her more difficult. So it
Yeah.
actually made my grief easier in a sense
Yeah.
because I kind of had to put it to the side because I had to be so focused on being there for my mom. So it did. I mean, it was a mind fuck because it was like I've lost this really important person in my life, but also I have this another really important person in my life that I need to show up for every day and I don't want that part to be harder. So
Right.
it became this like interesting balance, which is why when my mom passed, it just felt like I lost both of them almost on that day.
Of course. Oh my God, that makes so much sense. Like again, so twisted, but like I you are so strong. I don't know how, I mean, to be that positive and happy. I mean, that is just such a beautiful example of living in the moment and realizing what is in front of you. And I mean, it's like we always, I mean, I think so many like professionals probably would be like, yeah, don't put your grief to the side. But like this is just one of those examples where like grief is so complicated and we know it's not linear, but this is just like, for anyone out there who feels like it's like, which is one thing after another, this is just such a beautiful example of how to try and handle that with grace and as
Totally.
much happiness as
Yeah.
possible, which is just so much kudos to you. Honestly, a lot of people would not be able to do that.
Yeah. It just was one of those things where I kind of had no choice, and I feel
Right.
like that's another
Yeah.
important part of grief is that like
Well
you
said.
don't have any choice in what you're feeling. You don't really have any choice in how long you're going to feel a certain way or what is going to make it harder or easier for you. You just have to show up with whatever feeling you have in that moment. And the feeling for me that I knew that I needed for my mom and for my dad really was this idea of showing up for my mom and just being there for her,
Yeah.
which really allowed me in a weird way even to grieve my dad because I knew that I was doing what he would have wanted, right? He would have wanted me to show up for my mom. That was always his big concern before he had gotten sick was like, well, if something happens to me, what's going to happen to mom because she needed so much care at that point when he had started to get sick. So I knew that I was doing exactly what he would have wanted and so it made that grief easier because I knew like serving such an important purpose and role that he would be so proud of.
That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. Can I ask also two really quick sidebar? Do you have any siblings?
I do. She it lives in Texas. So she's just
Okay.
we're in Seattle, Washington and she's in Texas, so
That's
she just
hard
wasn't able to
logistically.
be present logistically.
Yeah, I hear about that happening so often, so that's why I was, like, asking that too, and it is tough when it falls onto one person, but also just what a gift that you got
Yeah.
that extra time with your mom and that you see it that way, and was
Yeah.
able to just be so present with her. What a gift for you and what a gift for her.
100%. I mean, I always describe my time with her as an opportunity and a blessing. Like it was
Love that.
such a beautiful opportunity to provide this care for her. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, there were times that it was frustrating that I didn't have family support, but also as even in the moment and as I reflect back, it just was such a beautiful opportunity
yeah.
to maintain a relationship with someone that was so important. And my husband had actually lost his dad about 5 years before we got married, or
Mhm.
somewhere around that time. And all he wished for was more time with his dad. So he was the biggest supporter of my mom having that time with me. And it was just kind of a great reminder for me from someone really close in my life
Yeah.
on what an opportunity it was to have however long. I mean, you don't know with dementia, right?
Yeah.
Dementia is a progressive neurocognitive disorder that, depending on what kind of dementia you have, depending on what other comorbidities you have, the impact it has on you.
Yeah.
So you never know. Some people live 15 years and some people live 5 or less. So it just, and even if we think about what we know about dementia is that there are stages. And so
Mhm.
as the stages are progressing, my mom was losing pieces of herself
Mm.
and losing her ability. So it's more than memory loss. Like she wasn't able to do her activities of daily living herself. She needed help
Right.
with the bathroom and showering and feeding and cooking. And she
Yeah.
eventually ended up in a wheelchair and she needed help getting lifted in and out of bed. So it's more than just these memories or her not knowing who I was. It was really this 24/7 care that I was providing her to meet her emotional, physical, every
Yes.
need that she had.
All the
Yeah.
things. Yeah. Wow. So, okay. So how long was that kind of like more full-time 24/7 care for you? Like,
Yeah, that I would say that the 24/7 care probably started in like 2019, and that was when she was still living with my dad, but then my
okay.
dad had started to get sick. He ended up in the hospital, and then she moved in with me overnight. And then our world changed, right? Like she was needing help with the bathroom and feeding. I mean she could feed herself, but
Mhm.
she needed help with cooking and all of these things so that she could live. She also had type 1 diabetes, so
Mm.
she couldn't manage her diabetes effectively because she wasn't able to monitor what she was eating or give the correct dosage. So that complicated it
Yeah.
pretty quickly, but she needed 24/7 care when she was living with me. But things she started to lose pieces all along, right? Like
Yeah.
she could feed herself with a fork and a spoon, and when she moved in with me, and then as she progressed, she was eating with her fingers, and then towards the end, I had to feed her. So there were
Mm.
still, even though she needed 24/7 care, and when she moved in with me, like it was continually progressing on what kind of care I needed to provide for her.
Got it. Makes sense. So when did you guys kind of start noticing that she was it like cognitive? Was it like memory things first? Like how did that first show up?
Yeah. So when she got diagnosed with dementia, it was, I believe, 2014. And what we actually noticed was she had had type 1 diabetes and she had always been able to beautifully manage it herself.
Mhm.
And she started to miss shots or she started to miscalculate. So she was running really high or she was running really low. She also was the person that managed the household. So things would just not get done in the same way.
Mhm.
And she was the one that was paying all the bills. So bills weren't getting paid. And she was always happy and sunny and friendly and outgoing, but she started to really withdraw from social situations and then withdraw from, spending time with people or sharing her thoughts and crying more. So we noticed these physical things, but also these emotional things that were just so heartbreaking for her.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my god. I mean both sides. Yeah, like you're and that must be such a trippy place for someone with dementia in like those early stages to be in because it's almost like I can't imagine I'm totally projecting here,
Yeah,
but I can only imagine like things aren't quite right, but then you almost like can't help it or you can't control it or
for
whatever that must
sure.
be so confusing. That's so
Yeah, I remember a couple years into her diagnosis, she would be really sad and she would say like, I don't know why I'm sad. Like I'm sad, but I don't know why. And like I can't even imagine that feeling, right? Like to just not have that self-regulation or
yeah.
understanding of what your emotions and why you're feeling a certain way.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Okay, so so much to unpack there, but one thing
Yeah.
I have to ask you about, this is like a little bit of a shift, but on a hopefully lighter note.
Yeah.
So obviously I found you through Instagram and all of the amazing things that you do. So have to know, what prompted you to create that Instagram or start sharing your sweet mom's story and your story that way, and providing guidance for those who are grieving, caregiving, all the things.
Yeah. So it was really unintentional. That's actually my personal Instagram. So if you go back like 10 years, it's just pictures of like me and my girlfriends and my dog. And what happened is my mom moved in with me and we started doing things together. I mean, that's from the
So
farmer's
cute.
market, right?
Yeah.
She started to be the person I was doing things with. It wasn't my girlfriends and it wasn't just me or just me and my husband. It was me and my mom. So I
Mm.
started posting our pictures and then I started using the hashtag dementia or Alzheimer's. And then I started to connect with other dementia caregivers and care partners in the Instagram community. And then it just kind of started growing. I was sharing these videos and then it really naturally progressed into I would share things and people would be like, "Oh, why do you do that?" So then I would start to share what I had learned and what had been helpful for us and then was able to support other caregivers. So it just naturally went from me just posting pictures of my mom cuz we were having fun and
Clearly.
to
I
the
love
like
it.
me creating this space now where I am continuing to share about our journey, but I'm able to share about our journey from a very reflective place. So I'm
Yes.
able to more intentionally share videos and be like, oh, so it was really helpful for my mom to maintain her dignity to offer her choice. So she couldn't pick out her clothes at the end of her journey, but she could pick between two shirts. So I've been able to really craft it into a place where I can provide tips and tricks for other care partners because that's what I wanted when she first moved in with me. All I wanted was someone to tell me how to care for
You're
her.
like,
So
"What
I
do I
want,
do?"
yeah. So I want other care partners to feel seen and heard and have support. So that's just naturally and organically been the space that I didn't even mean to create.
I love it. I love these sort of like happy accidents, especially out of something like loss. I mean, this is literally, loss has become gains, right? Like this is the
Yeah.
epitome of creating gains from your losses, and to be able to share that. And for me, just knowing you kind of as I do over social, but now here too, it's just like you are so clearly a teacher. Like that is your archetype, but also like, but you do it in such a beautiful and joyful and light way for a topic, for something that is, just truly so devastating and could be
Yeah.
so just draining and negative, and not that it's not, but it's you just make it in so digestible for something that is hard to digest. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I think that you have this image of dementia when you just hear that word, you hear dementia,
Yes.
Alzheimer's, any of that. And for me, that wasn't our story. That wasn't my mom and I story. She was able to live with me until she passed. We were able to connect and dance and find joy and laugh. And I think that that's another just beautiful perspective for people to see, right? Your life isn't over at diagnosis if you are able to still connect, if you are able to still find those moments of joy, you can still live a full life. And so I think that was something that I was so looking for when she moved in with me is
Yeah.
I was looking to find other care partners who were my age and were caring for their parents or their grandparents even. I mean, it didn't matter and just really being able to see that there could still be joy. And I think that provides people with a sense of opportunity and a sense of purpose even, right? Like I think
Yes.
there's so often you're like, okay, you got dementia diagnosis, which means it's progressive and at some point you're not going to be able to live alone and you can't drive and you can't.
Yeah, like, what can we do? Let's focus on that.
Yeah. So
Like,
that was always my focus with my mom. And so I'm just like here to try to change the stigma. And I know that that's something that she would want to, right?
yeah.
She would want to be a light for someone else that was on this journey.
Yeah. Speaking of the sun, the
Yeah,
sun
right? I
over.
know, she's just all light.
I know, she is nothing short of just exuding
Yeah.
all the light in the world. No, that's so true. And I just wanna, like, reiterate one more time what you said earlier that you kind of just, like, alluded to again, that I really if people take nothing away today, I think this is so beautiful, is reflecting that happiness and that joy back onto them. Like, they how it's affecting us, certainly it hurts, and that's one thing, but, like, to bring that more into their lives, like, that will I think that's just such a beautiful way to think about that, and the more that you kinda do that, you're building each other up, and you're just living on this higher vibrational level, not to sound all woo woo, but it's true.
Yeah,
Like,
totally.
and if you're gonna, we are all energy, right? So we reflect that back onto each other. And so, I mean, my gosh, if there was ever a time to like raise that up a little bit, it's when somebody is going through some
Totally.
dementia. So, I mean, something like that. And that's probably hard. Like my experience is more with cancer, but like, and that's a whole nother thing. But I mean, as much as possible, right? And just
Yeah,
making it so much about them. And, not that we can't make it about us. We absolutely need
totally.
to
Yeah,
have our space, and we have to grieve, and we have to do all the things because that is, again, literally a 24/7 job for you. So you can't, like, it's not
yeah.
almost sustainable to be like on it 24/7
Oh,
emotionally,
100%.
but
I
just
had to step away. I took lots of respite breaks. Like, I am not going to say that I was this like beacon of patience every minute of the day, right? Like, she did respite stays, she did overnight places. If things got really hard, I would walk out of the room and I would sit in the sun, or I would just take
oh
a break.
good.
Like, I think that's also important to name, is that that is how you are able to show up for
Yes.
your loved one, no matter what, if it is dementia or cancer or another illness. Like, you need to take care of yourself too. And I didn't always do a beautiful job of that, but I did try to allow myself that space. And I said I didn't have the space to grieve. I didn't have the space to grieve my dad in the way that I did after my mom passed,
Yeah.
but I did allow myself that time. My mom would be watching TV or hanging out with the dogs, and I would allow myself the time to cry or journal or talk to my therapist. I mean, I was still processing big emotions, just not in the same way that I did when my mom passed.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. So recently, you launched your own caregiver coaching and consulting. Tell me about that. I mean, we can kind of know where this came from, I think, but what prompted you to really think about that, take action on creating that, and the process
Yeah.
of getting it out there? Just anything
Yeah,
you want to share. I'm so excited.
definitely. I mean, I was informally doing it so much that I just was like, maybe this is what I decide to do as kind of my next step on
You're
this journey.
calling. Yeah.
I want to support caregivers. I want to support care partners. I want to support people on their journeys in, especially with dementia, especially with connection and finding joy. And it just came so naturally to me with my mom. And I have a billion ideas on how we can connect. And so it just grew so organically. I knew a couple other people that had done some certification programming. And so they had connected me with a certified caregiving consultant course. And I did that. And I just decided that this is how I'm turning my pain into purpose, right? My losses are becoming gains. Like,
Yeah.
this is what it is for me. I want to help other people, and I want to explore this path and see what it looks like. And I have a lot of friends or friends of friends that were reaching out to me. And I just realized I was doing a lot of work for people
Mhm.
for free, which was
Yep.
awesome. And I'm still happy to help. But it is also something where it can support me financially as well.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Because you so clearly have a service heart, and I can relate to that because I'm the same way. And I was just like, man, I
Yeah.
would love to give just away all of this grief support for free. But you know what? At the same time, we've been through the ringer. And also, I like to say, like, if you invest in a course or a certification, or you take it a step further, that I'm gonna say gives you a one up, but I don't mean that in like a slimy way. It's just like you've done the extra research and education to back up your experience and stuff. So
Yeah.
totally okay, I think, to charge for that. You have such an
Yeah.
expertise behind it now that, that I can completely see how that felt like a natural next step for
Yeah.
you. And I'm so
Well, and I
excited.
would have paid anything if that, like, my mom would have gotten diagnosed, or when my mom moved in with me, to be able to have someone that I was paying
Yeah.
to connect with, to provide resources, to collaborate, to brainstorm, to share ideas. If I would have paid, I don't even know how much
Just
money
like take my
to
money.
be able to call someone. And
I
so
know.
that's what I want to do for others, is I want to be that person that is walking that journey with them and that is supporting them. And I do think that there is a piece too, like, I probably would have wanted almost to pay for that service, because
Yeah.
when you're paying for a service, you know you're getting X, Y, and Z, right? Like,
Yep.
these are the things I am definitely going to help you do, as opposed to if it is something free, then you sometimes feel bad calling them, or they might have a lot going on, or they're not, you don't have this contract. So I mean, my husband and I always joke, like, if there would have been any person I could have called, I would have paid
Called
as much
me back
money
then.
as,
Like,
yeah, like, as much money as I had, because I needed help, and I needed help now. And
yeah.
that's really where often caregivers are at when they're starting to look for resources. It's because there's been a transition. It's because they are overwhelmed. It's because there's been a progression in the disease and they need help then. You aren't as often preparing for those things, because you can't, I mean, you sometimes just can't. My mom fell and broke her hip, and the needs of care that she needed were so different, right? So if
Um,
I could have, she was in the hospital, I could have called someone, they could have helped me even acquire supplies, I would have been thrilled.
Nightmare. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, just to have that extra person, like, you just hit the nail on the head. I was so happy you just said that. The preventative, like grief support, kind of same thing. Like there's no like preventative grief support that people typically seek out. It's like they seek it out when they're like already deep in the hole and they're
Mhm.
like, oh shit, maybe now I
Yeah,
should,
help, help, yeah.
Right, and it's just like, no, like, yeah, we're okay, it doesn't really make sense to, like, I can see why people don't reach out for support when, like, nothing's really happened yet, but
Yeah.
I think that's such a beautiful message that you spread, and it's certainly one that I'm trying to spread, is just like, okay, if there's a hardship, if there's something going on in your life, like, seek the help before you even kinda know you really need it,
Totally,
or, just kind
totally.
of buffer, or, mentally prepare yourself in a way.
Yeah, and seek
Yeah.
help, right? I think
Yes.
that's a piece, right? I think so often people in their grief or people in their caregiving, they feel like it's something that they have to do on their own, or it's something that, like, I'm going to show how strong I am, or I don't know, I don't have people in my life who are supporting me, so I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do this, or I feel bad that I'm still grieving, or I feel bad that I'm unhappy in my caregiving journey because this is my mom or my brother or my child. And so I think that that becomes such a place where we can become such a safety net and such a place for them to see all the amazing things that they're doing and how much work in grief, right? Like, you
Yeah.
got up today and you brushed your teeth and you brushed your hair. Like, let's celebrate
Woo!
that, right? As a
Yeah,
caregiver, like,
but
okay, you
seriously.
took care of your loved one and you took a half of a shower. Like,
Yes.
woo! You washed your hair, you
Yes.
washed your body, so how
So
we can
true.
become that person that is naming all of the things that they're doing and celebrating alongside their journey.
Yeah, it's so true, and I just wanna also mention, like, therapy, coach or consultant, whatever it is, like, I always wanna remind people, like, 'cause I know money is such an issue for so many people, and I always like to remind people, like, try not to think of it so much as, like, what you're paying by the hour or whatever it is. Like, obviously, do it within your means, but you're paying for the transformation. You're paying for the evolution. And so I encourage people too, when they're seeking help from someone like you, like, just not to get too hung up on that, because it's so hard to put a price on that. Again, that evolution, that help that a coach or somebody who's consulting with you or whatever is going to help you get through.
Yeah.
It saves you so much more emotional turmoil and possibly more emotional damage like later down the line to just invest in it now. And,
Yeah.
it's amazing how it can change your life getting the right
Yeah.
help. So,
Well, and really provide you that time back, right? Like
yes.
if you're always constantly in this space where you're problem solving or you feel like everything's falling apart around you, you don't have any time for anything else but problem solving and trying to fix it. So it's so important that you are able to like have these tools in place so that when the next thing does happen that you are ready. You
Yeah.
do get so much more time back though by having tools and strategies in place in your caregiving journey.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. So, definitely curious, what is something about your loss of either parent, I mean, anything really you wanna touch on in your journey that you found to be the most difficult? So, if you wanna touch on the anticipatory grief aspect or just really after they were both gone, like, what is something that was the most difficult or something that maybe you had this moment where you were like, "I was not warned about this,"
Yeah.
and, like, and why is that particular thing maybe the most
Yeah.
difficult, or why does that stand out to you?
I would say in my anticipatory grief, I think for me, the hardest part was watching my mom losing those pieces of herself. I kind of touched on that earlier, but it was hard to lose my mom. But I was able to like name that was her dementia and like be frustrated at her dementia and like no, just meet her where she was. But my mom being this love and this person that cared so much about people, like it broke my heart for her, knowing that she didn't know I was her daughter. She didn't know what our connection was because that was something that was so important for her. I mean, all she ever wanted to be, like growing up, when they'd say, "What do you want to be?" She wanted to be a mom. So then to just lose that identity is heartbreaking. So in the anticipatory grief, it was watching her lose those pieces specifically. In the grief part, I think that the thing that surprised me the most was just how long I was so sad, right? Like I thought, oh, a week, I'd be sad for a couple days or I'd be sad for a month, but actually how sad I still continually am. And even I thought, at the 1 year mark, after that 1 year mark, I would feel better. And in some
Mhm.
ways I do. And in some ways I have more tools and strategies and therapy and grief groups and all of these things. But in another way, I'm even sadder because now my mom just feels so much more further away.
Yes. Okay. I was literally wondering if that's where you were going with that because I feel like I'm kind of in that same phase with my parents. Now they're like 3.5 years out from losing them. And I literally just did an episode on this where I was talking about like you, God, it feels like it just happened yesterday at some point. Like you can remember that decline their last few days, like it's, 10
Yeah.
minutes ago. But now it's like just enough time has gone by where now you feel a bit distant and you're just like, "Oh my gosh, what advice would they give me right now?" Like, you almost, like, start questioning, like, "Okay, is this what they would say, or is this, like, what I'm thinking they would say?" And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget their voice and forgetting
Yeah.
what they looked like and everything," you know? And their
Exactly.
mannerisms and things, you never really forget that, so I wanna, like,
No.
encourage everyone, just
Thank you.
keep the memory alive as much as you can. Take videos if they're still here. My God, I
Yeah.
wish I did that more. I'm so like, oh, I'm so envious of all the things that you have with your sweet mom.
Yeah, I feel so fortunate to have
Wish I did
those
that more.
videos and photos. That's what I mean, that's like the biggest thing I tell my friends. I'm like, take the videos. I'm taking videos of you so that when my nieces and nephews want
Yes.
to see you, I can be like, look, this is your mom. I can send it all. Like, I
Yeah.
want them to have those memories because I do have the videos and the photos from really post diagnosis. I don't have any videos from before, right? I don't have
Yeah.
videos of what my mom was like pre dementia. So, granted, she was pretty similar in a lot of ways, but it still would have been nice to have some of those as
No,
well.
it's just not quite the same. Yeah, of course.
Exactly.
Of course. So, okay, so to sort of start finishing this up, but I'd love to know from you, like, what are two or three tips or pieces of guidance that you would give to grievers, whether kind of anybody going through a hardship right now, but especially maybe people here dealing with a loved one with dementia, that are, experiencing that and like just what wisdom can you impart?
Yeah, I think my number one thing is like figure out what that support team, what that support system looks like for you. So does that look like therapy? Does that look like having a really close friend that you can confide in or you can talk to when you're having a rough day? Does it look like having a grief counselor, having a specific grief coach? What does that look like for you? And really establishing what that support system is for you, because there's going to be days that you're pretty okay and you don't feel like you need that support system, but there's going to be days where you need that. You
You're your
need
wits
that
end.
person you
Yeah.
can call. And it doesn't always have to be like, it was hard for me to talk to some of my girlfriends about it, even though they were kind and supportive and wonderful, but they just didn't understand what I was going through.
Yeah.
And so as helpful as they were and as often as they would say, call me whenever you need anything,
Yeah,
it
you're just like, "You
wasn't.
don't really get it."
Yeah, it wasn't the connection that I needed.
You
So
need it.
a grief coach became that for me. Or I became closer with a couple of my girlfriends who had lost a parent because we had that connection. So it really figuring out what that support system and that support team is for you is really helpful. And then my second biggest piece of advice is just to be patient with yourself. So if you are a caregiver and you are experiencing anticipatory grief, like be patient with yourself. You're patient with your loved one on a daily basis, but give yourself that same grace and patience. And if you're grieving, give yourself that grace and patience. Understand that it's okay to be sad for a long time. It's okay to be like, you know what? All I'm going to do today is brush my teeth, or all I'm going to do today is get to work, or all I'm going to do today is sleep. Like just really being so patient with your heart because it's broken. You've experienced a huge loss, and that's hard. So I think that idea around support and patience with yourself can really help you to navigate the different bumps in your journey. And I think that piece around time is so interesting and something that you
Mhm.
just don't expect. I think when my mom passed, I was like, okay, 3 months, cool, like moving
Yeah.
on. But it's just this piece around I'm still patient with myself. It's just as hard some days. Like a couple of days ago, I just had a hard grief day. So I just needed to give myself the patience to know that I was going to get through it. But it was okay if that day I cried more, if that day I decided to take a nap. So just giving myself the space I need.
Yeah, I love that. I think the time part is so important, and then just like you might be triggered by something or you might be triggered by nothing, and it just for whatever reason is coming up for you that day, or maybe you're like holding it in more than you realized and things just come to the surface. And I think that's important to acknowledge, but definitely the time. Like it's so hard with like societal pressures or like having to get back to work and like kind of act or pretend like everything is like kind of okay, or people just expect you to sort of be
Yeah.
operating at 100% again, or so they think. And I think a lot of us try and have good poker faces, but like meanwhile we're like dying inside. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just completely taking any time frame off of it, and also remembering, like, speaking of triggers or things, like, when I went through the wedding process, like, that kind of re-triggered me, and not to maybe the point where my acute grief was, but, like, it was just there's so many things throughout our lives, no matter how old we are, that we might there's the initial grief, but then, like, things that we might have to grieve and re-grieve that haven't even come up yet. So,
Totally.
and loss is nothing if not like the primary loss sometimes, and then like all those little secondary losses. And that's why I'm so glad you brought up like the logistical things of like, it's their absence, but then all these little nuanced things in between. And you're just like, I'm exhausted and just want to go to
Yeah.
bed. So go
Exactly,
to
and
bed if you
knowing
need
that
to.
that's okay, that sometimes that's what you do, but also how
Yeah.
can you have a plan in place for some of those things that are going to be triggers? Like, my
Yeah.
mom's birthday is always gonna be a trigger for me, at the day she passed is always gonna be a trigger, so how do I have extra supports in place on those days?
Mm.
If it looks like I'm not cooking dinner that night, we're going to order takeout. Like, what are those things that I just know are okay? And they're probably going to be something that I'm going to have in place for the rest of my life.
Yeah. You just have to like, I feel like learn your capacity for things and just giving yourself the grace, you said it perfectly, for that to adjust. And that does take some learning and that so that, anybody who's maybe listening within like the first year of a death or something maybe or is going through that anticipatory grief, that might be very unclear right now, or you might still be trying to figure that out. So just encouraging and empowering everybody to just give yourself time to do that and to figure it out because it does not that doesn't come overnight, right? You
No,
you
not
might
at
have to,
all.
like, do
I'm still
something or
working on it. Yeah.
honestly, yeah,
I will be forever.
yeah, same, same. Alright, so last question is, what does finding gains from your losses mean to you?
Yeah, I think for me, it really is this idea of honoring who my mom was and honoring our story and how those pieces together are supporting others on the same journey or on similar journeys. So, how do I take the pain of my mom's dementia or the pain of her loss, but really turn that into my purpose and the way that I am able to carry myself and the things that I am now doing that I wasn't doing before, right? Before my mom moved in with me, I was teaching kindergarten and I was like, this is what I'm going to do for the
Yeah.
rest of my life. And now I am in this space where I am advocating for caregivers. I am sharing our story to challenge the stigma around dementia. I am have my own little small business for caregiving and coaching and consulting. I'm also working with this nonprofit that is focused on supporting youth caregivers for younger onset families. So how am I turning what was really challenging for me into something that's going to be really beautiful for others? And that has completely changed my life in a career sense, but it's also changed my life in just the way that I approach the world. I'm in this space where it's like life is short. So take the vacation. Life is short. So spend time with your friends. Like, so what? I'm going to be a little bit tired the next day. Like, I need to invest in the people that are important to me. And that's what my mom would want me to do. My mom would want me to say yes to opportunities, to have the fun, to laugh, but also know that there's this balance in it's okay also to say no to things that I don't want to do. So it's
Yes.
okay to have some boundaries, but also to just really live in the moment and enjoy life in a way that I maybe didn't before. I mean, I think I
Yeah.
took for granted how long life is, but really how short it
It's
is and
not.
how short it is to potentially have your all of your capacities and all of these things in place. And so I've just really turned it into a different career and path and support for caregivers, but also turned it into just this shift in my perspective and how I view life and opportunities and connections with people.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, and I just love all of that, and it's, we don't need to like live in fear that we might lose our capacities or that we're gonna die of cancer, whatever. It's just acknowledging like, wow, okay, like I feel like death and loss and grief does nothing if not make you understand like, oh, this is really what this whole shindig is about. Okay, let me take a
Ah,
step back and like, what is there to learn and grow and evolve from here? And whether or not anyone here listening, like whether or not your loss completely changes your career path or whatever it
ah,
looks like for you, just as long as we can, I think, step away with, again, getting in touch with ourselves, taking those deep breaths and being like, okay, maybe there's a little more to the picture here. And like, not to say like everything happens for a reason, but it's just
no,
like, okay, this has happened. This is the hand I was dealt. What can I do with this? How can
yeah,
I improve my life? How can I improve the life of others? How can I serve?
ah,
How can I, make the oh, what is that saying? Like it's your mess is your message, right? It's like
ah.
again, same with the pain and the purpose and all the things. And I just love that so much. And you've done that so beautifully. And you are just impacting the lives of so many. And I am just loving watching your entire journey. It's so fun.
Oh,
It's so cool. Your content's amazing. Speaking of the content, so where can everyone, this will all be in the show notes too, by the way, but where can everybody find you, work with you, connect with you?
yeah. So I have a website, and the website is carepartnerpatty.com, which is
Like a
CarePartnerPatti.com.
little song.
I know, I'm like, oh, I got to dance it out. And then my Instagram is Miss Patty Cake, and my TikTok is Care Partner Patty.
Love it. Easy. So good. Thank you so much for being here today. This was like, oh, I feel like this is like such an action-packed conversation and
Yeah, we were
so
all
many
over the place.
I know, but that's how we roll around here. But so many just like nuggets of gold coming out of this. And anticipatory grief truly is something I'm so passionate about. I went through it with my own parents. I know so many people might be going through that in their own ways. And at the end of the day, no matter how we journey through grief and loss, like even though all of our experiences look different, I know there's so many things that we can all just relate to on just a soul level, on just how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves, all the things. So I'm so grateful you were here today and talking us through all of this. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was lovely.
You're so welcome.